Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our special meeting today. We will get to all of our formalities at our regular 5:30 meeting. So with that, we're going to jump right in. And I'm going to turn it over to the city manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Today, we are going to introduce the city's legislative platform. I received some questions about why we're doing this, and apparently this is the first time in city's recent history that I can discern. There's a few reasons we want to do this, and one is that the city council policy and procedure provide the authority to create legislative action program, and under that section, under section 3.10 legislative action program, it provide an authority to have a legislative platform. They call the program. And the other reason is that this is one of the best practices that local government engage with. In SLO County, all the cities in SLO County and the county of SLO have legislative platform. And so then once this was approved and adopted, the city of Morro Bay can join the rest of the cities, our sister cities in the county. And also in developing this platform, we the city staff engaged cities lobbyists, both at state level and a federal level. The city have two lobbyist firms on retainer. One is the Ferguson Group, and who I believe is on Zoom at this point. And Ferguson Group represented us on federal issues, helping us with our advocacy trip to Washington, D.C. and help us secure federal funding. And then we also have Townsend, which help us with state legislative issues and grant seeking. And Spencer Street is sitting in the audience. He is going to make a presentation. So also in this legislative platform, we included SLO Caucus, one of the SLO Caucus requests, and we can get to that when we in the latter part of discussion. With that, I'm ready for City Council and the members of public question, and Spencer can help me with some of the questions as well.
Thank you. I'm going to back up 1 minute because I missed two formalities. One, we do have a quorum, and two, public comment on items on the agenda for this special meeting. Seeing no public comment, I will close it and bring it back. Thank you. I didn't have my notes in front of me. Got too excited. Okay, so are we turning this over then to our lobbyist, to Spencer, City Manager Kimball?
Oh,
yeah, ready to go?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, Spencer Street, and I introduced him earlier, and then Spencer, please come up, and Spencer can lead us through the guiding principles and the issues, and then also how this legislative platform is being commonly used by other entities.
Perfect. Mayor, council, staff, thank you very much for having me. Spencer Street with Townsend Public Affairs. Overall purpose of the platform is to serve as the city's guide through engaging with both state and federal legislation, ensuring that legislation aligns with city council priorities and also advocating for policies that directly or indirectly impact the city of Morro Bay. Overall goals with adopting a legislative platform are commonly to protect local control, promote fiscal stability, securing funding, and advancing the city's sustainability and development priorities as well. Throughout the legislative platform, there are several guiding principles that guide most of the highlighted policy areas and policy statements for supporting or potentially opposing legislation. Preserving local control, that involves opposing legislation that undermines the city's ability to manage local policies and resources. promoting fiscal stability, advocating for measures that protect local revenue streams, and opposing unfunded mandates that could eat into the city's general fund. And also supporting funding opportunities, finding ways to bring in more funding for the city for regional or from regional, state, and federal funding sources for critical projects such as infrastructure, public safety, housing, and other environmental initiatives as well. So getting into some of the highlighted policy areas and policy statements in local government finance, this would involve supporting flexibility in creating new revenue sources for the city, ensuring reimbursements for services to non-residents, including access to the beach, at the harbor and waterfront, public safety, transportation, and then also funding for renewable energy and climate adaptation projects. This could involve opposing state and federal revenue diversions, franchise fee reductions, and also unfunded mandates. Under administrative services, there are several categories within this one, starting off with employee relations. There's often legislation related to workers' compensation. So the city could support legislation that streamlines workers' compensation systems and improving access to affordable healthcare for public employees and public employers. This could also involve opposing legislation that imposes unfunded mandates or reducing local control over employment issues such as collective bargaining and benefits. Under information technology, this could involve supporting proposals that enhance cybersecurity and protecting the city from cyber threats. And for transparency, we often work on legislation that allows for remote public participation and improved public notice methods for local governments. Under community development, this can involve supporting efforts to strengthen local planning, affordable housing resources, and homelessness initiatives. However, this could also involve opposing policies that impose state or regional control over land use or zoning decisions. This has become a relatively popular issue area, both at the state and federal level, where legislation will circumvent local governments' ability to zone and control land use. For climate change and natural resources, supporting initiatives addressing sea level rise, clean energy projects, sustainable development, and funding for air quality improvement and emissions reduction, especially here out on the coast. Also opposing reductions in local authority over clean energy projects. Community services for the city to support parks, recreation, and open space. This would involve supporting equitable access to public spaces, collaboration for new parks, and measures to reduce liability for natural disaster impacts on public lands, and opposing policies that limit the city's ability to enforce parking rules or recover costs related to maintenance. Wildfire insurance, this is going to be another big issue this year in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., specifically here in California, supporting legislation encouraging insurers to cover properties in high-risk fire zones. Public safety, supporting funding for law enforcement, wildfire mitigation, and disaster preparedness, and also advocating for penalties related to fentanyl crimes. However, could also oppose overly restrictive policies limiting law enforcement capabilities related to public works. The city could support increased funding for transportation infrastructure, utility undergrounding, and pedestrian and bicyclist safety improvements. And also, as Yvonne mentioned, working with SLOCOG on legislation that would allow for a future voter-approved transportation-specific measure to be waived from the 2% local sales tax limit. Also very specific to the city of Morro Bay, working on the harbor and waterfront. There's an entire section that was included in the legislative platform to outline some different positions related to harbor and waterfront, including supporting the continued dredging of Morro Bay Harbor, improving public access to marinas, sustainable fishing, and funding for harbor infrastructure, and also supporting funding and programs for seabird protection, oil spill prevention, boat launch facilities, sediment management, and more. Also, this would involve opposing any actions redirecting harbor-related funds or hindering the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers obligations and policies that would divert funds from the state harbors and watercraft revolving fund that the city benefits from. So moving forward, this document will really help the city engage with regional, state, and federal entities to advocate for Morro Bay's priorities. This will be implemented by leveraging the platform. Responding to legislation with either support or oppose positions could also involve support if amended, oppose if amended, and working with state, regional, federal lawmakers on general comments on legislation as well. And of course, Townsend will continue to monitor legislation that's introduced and give regular updates to the city and city council on legislative activity in Sacramento. And we use a matrix that's sent to the city outlining various bills. The deadline to introduce legislation is February 21st, at least in Sacramento. So after that, we'll have a good idea of the universe of legislation that is out there, already tracking some for this city. But concluding, this platform will really emphasize that Morro Bay's voice is heard in Sacramento. This is a great tool used by cities to publicly state positions on legislation, will allow the city to swiftly take action on legislation if needed, but the authority is, of course, still with the city to take different positions on legislation. And I'm, of course, available for any questions.
Thank you, Spencer. We'll get to the questions in just a minute. Mike, are you online?
Hello, Mayor. Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you.
Great, great. Great to be with you folks this evening.
Thank you. You also. Are you in California or Washington?
This week I am in Midwest time, actually, but I'll be back on DC time February 3rd.
There you go. Thank you. Did you have anything to add for our discussion here?
I reviewed, and first, Mayor and Council, thank you very much for allowing me to be here with you today. I did get a chance to review the legislative platform and provided input. I think that the federal and state issues and priorities that are important to Morro Bay are reflected in the document that you've produced. I also think that this document will be very helpful as we talk with your congressional delegation, not only to help us sort of, make sure that we're on task, but make sure that we use this to keep your delegation informed. There's a lot going on, as you may be aware, in DC and throughout the federal government at this time, and having a document like this provides a good foundation from which we can work, and also one we can go back to when there's a lot of noise and static in the air. It's good to be able to look to your foundation documents so that you know where you are and where you want to go. Also, because there are a number of things that are moving on the federal level at this time, both in California with the executive order specifically related to California water and fires, as well as other executive orders and actions that will impact California and cities like Morro Bay. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about those. And I will tell you that it's very much a moving target right now. So if I cannot answer your questions, we'll research it and get back to you just as soon as we can. But in addition to talking about the agenda, the federal and state legislative platform, if you have any questions about things that are going on right now, happy to address that as well.
Thank you, Mike. And then we do have Mr. Worley here from SLOCOG. If you want to give us just a real brief on the one piece that's included in there regarding that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. James Worthley, Deputy Director of the San Luis Obispo Council of Governments, or SLOCOG. Well, I'll be brief, but I need a clicker. So SLOCOG is the region's transportation planning agency, which means we take state and federal funding and we improve transportation by funneling it to our local communities and jurisdictions. So this item is actually on legislation in terms of If the state legislation is introduced and if it is supported at the state level, it will retain your future local funding options. Now, currently, sales tax in 6 of our 7 cities, they've all hit the button, I guess. There's a few clicks, so go ahead. The base rate's at 7.25% into the state. Our unincorporated county has that, so Cayucas and Avila Beach are paying 7.25. Currently, 6, not 5 of our cities are at 1.5% above that. And there's a 2% cap, meaning there's a half cent left for 6 of our cities. When that half cent is gone, or if one city takes that half cent up, a region-wide measure cannot occur for transportation or other purposes. Any citizens initiative or one single city or a county-wide measure could take up that half cent that remains. Go ahead one more time. And if that happens, there is no potential for a region-wide transportation-specific measure. However, there is opportunities to pass legislation at the state level that a number of counties have already done, a number of regions have done, some at a 0.5% above or outside that 2%, not really above, but outside the 2%, and some as high as 2% on top of or outside that existing 2% cap. The item today is to seek your support to proposing legislation that would allow the potential for a voter-approved sales tax measure that's specifically for transportation to be outside that 2%. And there is, I know, a lot of concern of why is this related? It's related to, go ahead, transportation funding, the gas tax, and a potential or possible sales tax measure. And one more time. So the gas tax here shown growing over the last 75 years. You see it peaking there at about the 2004, the very highest peak of the bottom black line there. And if you think back 25 years ago, what was going on, and we were seeing the emergence of hybrid vehicles, we were seeing the emergence of high mileage vehicles, and then we started to trend down about 4 years later, 2004, as it started to drop. Then you see COVID spike downward, and then the recovery, not quite a recovery, but a bump back up. And that was about 4 or 5 years ago. Again, the emergence of new technology with electric vehicles. And in 2023, the electric vehicles made up 25% of all new vehicle purchases. That trend has only grown over the last few years, 15%, 20%, then 25%. So it is a downward trend for a gas tax, and we don't want to continue that trend if we want to see our transportation systems improve for safety, for maintenance, for operations. There's a better way, and 25 counties have already done this. They have passed a sales tax with their voters. That's 90% of all Californians have this tax already. In our tourist attracting region, our sales tax is growing along that black line, but adjusted for inflation, one more to click, please, along that orange line, a much better trend line for funding our transportation systems than the downward trending gas tax. Again, over the last 15 years, that trend line for gas tax is going down. The trend line for sales tax is going up. If we were to look back over the last 15 years, we've lost out on $350 million in the region for transportation improvements. That could have been doubled or tripled or more because those other counties are taking their funds and matching state grant, competitive grants, and outmatching us, outcompeting us for state funds. We don't have the matching funds to do that. So that's why we're looking at potentially this legislation that would allow us to get out of the way of competing measures that will, or one day will come up, or it could be several cities outside of Morro Bay that identify that that last half cent really needs to be for their future needs, perhaps. So nothing here approves or initiates any new tax, nor does it change how tax measures might be approved. It merely reduces the conflicts of potentially dueling measures for the remaining half cent sales tax and puts a region-wide transportation-specific measure outside that 2%. And that's it in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other parts of the presentation right now? City Manager Kimball? We're good?
That'll conclude, yeah, that'll
Thank you.
conclude our.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'm going to bring it back to council and start with some questions. I'll start to my left, Councilmember Eccles. Question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I do have a couple of questions. One specifically in the document at the bottom of page 2 under administrative services. I've read this in item number 6, the expansion of property rights in public employment and procedural requirements that hinder or increase the public costs of effective performance management, including legislation that obstructs management rights and disciplinary measures. So that appears to me to be a personnel-related matter, unless I'm misinterpreting the phrase property rights. How does property rights comport with the rest of that clause there?
Absolutely. It is mainly focused on, personnel issues, property rights more so as it pertains to the interaction between city staff, employees. There is an actual property that's being exchanged if that's a concern, but property rights insofar as it is their employment with the city.
Oh,
So,
I've just never heard personnel matters referred to as
Property rights,
property
yeah.
rights. I would defer to you, the interim city attorney and the city manager on that.
It does need to be clarified. I mean, I would say there is a difference, and that we could probably clarify that in the document.
Great, thank you.
yeah, we can clarify that, but I also wanted to clarify that in labor in labor in the world with labor management and property rights are often referring to employees' right to employment. So employees here, California is by right kind of state. Other states, employees do not. It basically is saying you would not, or getting into more legal realm. I know I'm sitting next to city attorney. I felt like I may not be able to explain it clearly. What I was saying is that property rights, we can clarify that. I have seen the reference in labor world use of property right referring to employees' right to their employment.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, I would just indicate that to a layperson reading this, or even a moderately informed person reading this, it seems incongruent, doesn't make sense. So if we could just expound on that language a little bit, that would be great. And then on page number 3 under support, item number 2, funding and policy modifications that require additional staffing resources be deployed by HCD to ensure uniformity within the housing element compliance and review process. We should probably spell out housing and community development there, because a lot of people don't know what HCD is. And then it's not clear if this requests additional staffing resources from HCD, I think is we're funding for additional staffing resources. Again, this one seems just a bit unclear to me.
Okay, we can absolutely clarify that.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, and then the last item, well, 2 last items, one more question and then a comment. Well, I'll save my comments. One last question. Did council or did management consult with the Commercial Fishermen's Organization regarding the waterfront, the harbor and waterfront section?
Those are provided by the with assistance from the Harbor Department, and I believe that, yeah.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Edwards, questions?
Yeah, I hate to be nitpicky, but I think the document starts out with opposing on community development. Let's see, let me get up here. Local government finance, it starts out with oppose, then support. Somewhere down the line, we go to support and then oppose. I think when it gets to energy infrastructure, you see, then it's support and then oppose. And I wasn't sure if that was purposeful or not?
No, if for uniformity, happy to make that change.
Thank you.
Questions?
Probably a little naive, but this is on the slow cog 2% limit. How do you get funded right now? I probably should know that, but I'm fairly new on the council. How is the slow cog being funded currently?
So SLOCOG is both a state designated and federally designated transportation authority. We receive primarily gas tax funds from the state and feds.
Okay, and so basically what you're asking here is that since our sales tax is 8.75, you want to go over that limit because you would only get a 0.5% because it would be 9.25. Is that correct?
Actually,
City of Morro Bay is 8.75.
correct. So we're asking that legislation be considered and approved at the state level so that if voters are posed a measure and they approve the measure for transportation specific, it would be outside the 2% cap. That measure likely proposed by SLOCOG would be 0.5%.
Okay, so in other words, if you wanted it 0.5%, then wouldn't you be within the 2% because our local tax is 7.25?
We would,
Okay,
and we could take up the last bit of the cap. However, if other measures come along and obstruct the ability for SLOCOG to pursue it, whether it's a region-wide or county-wide initiative or a single city that's already at that 1.5%, it precludes it from happening throughout the region.
Okay.
So last time in 2024, when we were seeing how the measures were proceeding in the 4 cities that went for renewals or additions this last 2024, in 2022, the deck's cleared for 2024. And then as we progressed forward, we found out, oh, no, the deck is not cleared. There's plenty of people that are looking at that want us to get out of the way. And with SLOCOG has been looking at this possibility for over 20 years. Over 20 years, we've been told, no, now's not a good time. So
Okay.
one of the issues was we might, meaning a city, needed that last bit or all of the bit of the 2%. So this gets us out of that fray. I think I lost.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
So did you understand that, Bill? So for clarification, the other 6 cities, we're the last city, have signed on. What the understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, James, is that they're asking the state like for a waiver type thing. So if the city of Morro Bay or any of the other 6 cities want to come back and still do a tax, we wouldn't have been tapped out. And this is to say they want to put it on the ballot for the voters of the county to approve.
All right, thank you.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Well said.
That's my seat. SLOCOG. Any other questions right now, Bill? Councilmember Landrum? Excuse me, Councilmember LaFay.
So could you clarify with SLOCOG that 90% of the cities, was that in the state or in the county?
90% of the state's population
90%.
has a transportation-specific sales tax funding
Oh, okay.
all modes of transportation.
Okay. And has Caltrans, I mean, SLOCOG ever thought of, with the declining gas tax, have they ever thought of, instead of going after people for more taxes, advocating for the user to pay for the roads rather than having the rest of the population subsidize that?
Yes, for over a decade, we've been hearing that we just need to ask the state for more money. We need the state to change how they collect the funds. The state's been having murmurs of how they're going to change to collect transportation funds, but they've made no progress. When we've asked our legislators, hey, this needs to be fixed, it's obvious to everybody the gas tax is going down. It's not a fair process to fund our transportation system based on electric vehicles and high mileage vehicles. And the legislators tell us time and time again, they have fixed it, Look at these 25 counties, look at the 90% of the voters in California. They're taking care of themselves. If we want to fix our systems, that's the avenue we need to go.
Okay. And I guess I would like to ask the other two lobbyists, how long have we had your services? And without a legislative platform, how did you advocate for us prior to this? I mean, if you need this now, how did you do it in the past?
Legislative platforms offer a way for city to more quickly take positions on legislation. If how other cities have used them is vesting the city with the authority to take positions, support or oppose, or otherwise on a piece of legislation that reflects something in the legislative platform without coming back to it for a full hearing on every single bill that's coming through the legislature. So previous to this, I would work with city staff, send legislation, send our position, our analysis and our recommendations, and then from there it would go back to the city. This was still, it was still very effective to go to legislators with general principles, but with it spelled out, it is much more helpful to then go to them and say, this is the city's platform, these are their priorities, these are the different projects and bills that fit into the platform. It's a little bit more explicit and spelled out.
Some of it's really similar to League of California Cities, which we are also members of. So it seems like it's sort of redundant that we would even need to tell you this in this platform, and that maybe some of these things might lock us into having things advocated for us that we weren't even aware of at the moment. So that's my hesitation. I'm just curious.
I will not go and advocate for something that I've not already discussed with the city. Even if it is in here, I will of course still check with the council, with city staff before going into any office, before speaking to any member. I'm not going to be, or we are as the TPA, we're not going to go and advocate without consulting with the city first. There are general policies in here that do apply to most local governments, and we made sure to incorporate quite a bit that was very specific to Morro Bay as well. It started out pretty bare bones, and with a lot of incorporation from the city, different city departments, it was fleshed out to something that is much more specific to the city.
Okay, and then are we, how, I'm not clear on how this process is. Are we making suggestions now or
Some questions,
just
right?
questions? Okay.
Yeah, and thank you very much. I'll take all the edits. I'll work with the city staff on making those edits, and of course come back with a final version before and if the city wants to adopt and accept the platform.
Thank you.
Question?
Just curiosity, staff, is this costing the city any money?
The lobbyists are on retainer, their services are retainer services. And so to draft this platform is included in retainer.
Councilmember Roberts?
Yeah, I think I want to piggyback off of where Council Member Landrum was going. So, for example, you said February 1st was the deadline for the bills right now that are,
Yeah, fair.
and then you would be addressing them. So, for example, I think maybe just taking it simply. So like, Assemblymember Addis's AB 303, which is in right now.
Mhm.
What would be the action plan for you with that one? Because it does pertain to us, right? Battery
Mhm.
storage. So I guess maybe taking that one, what would be the action of you as a lobbyist?
I would send all the information I have to city staff, give my recommendation on how the bill will impact the city of Morro Bay, and ask whether the city wants to take a position on the legislation. If the city does, I will draft a letter supporting, opposing, or offering comments, send it back to the city. And if city council wants to take a position, then working with the city manager, get that signed by the mayor, send it to Assemblymember Addis's office and the legislature. So there will be quite a bit of coordination between myself and the city.
And so if we didn't have this this legislative platform basically kind of makes that easier for you because you don't have to second guess what are things that apply to us and what.
Yes, and then I
don't.
can go and look specifically in, I guess for Assembly Bill 303, look in under Energy Infrastructure and Resources, number 1, measures that expand access to resource for local governments to plan clean energy projects. I can say this bill fits into the city's legislative platform under this specific point. This is my recommendation based on the city's legislative platform.
Can I ask a question? So in my mind, as a lobbyist, you would be doing these things anyways. Like you would, if you were being paid by a municipality, you would understand what their policies were, and it wouldn't be unknown to you. And that's, it seems, all of this seems kind of like just a formality, really, and that it's sort of obvious. If you're working for this, if you're choosing to work for a city, you sold yourself to a city, you should know what they want.
Yes, absolutely. And this isn't more so for me, it's for the legislature and for other organizations and for the public to see the city's legislative priorities. You're absolutely right. Working with city staff and city council, it was, I wouldn't say easy to find things to put into this, reflecting the city's positions. And you're absolutely right. I would, with Assembly Bill 303, I would make similar recommendations, but I also wouldn't be able to point back and say, this is something that is not actually codified, but formalized with the city. This is a position that is taken more generally. This is a piece of legislation that fits into and could support the city.
And how does it help the public and the legislature? How does it help them?
Helps understand the city's needs and priorities and agendas. There are, around 300 cities in the state. A lot of them have platforms, and they are very helpful for members of the legislature outside of your local delegation to see what the city of Morro Bay is interested in and where your positions lie with legislation.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I would summarize it when you did a comparison to, information or positions the League of Cities takes as us as a member. This is specific to Morro Bay, where the League of Cities is representative of the entire membership. For me, I think it comes back to best practices is what I would think. This document isn't, and thank you for explaining, that I think there's a concern that because you have a legislative platform, you just unilaterally take our position without any involvement. And I think that's just a misnomer. Yeah, thank you. I don't have any questions right now. Thank you, Spencer. Any other questions from council? So comments? Councilmember
May-
Edwards, comments? Councilmember LaFay, Councilmember Lander.
Okay, I do have some comments. I don't see anywhere on there anything regarding economic development. And I think that would be an important thing to have in there. To enhance greater business retention, investment, and maybe job growth.
Certainly a very good, I'm looking at Spencer, it's certainly an excellent suggestion. The thinking is that economic development a lot of time can create a conflict among itself. If we say support job creation and industry would support job creation, and then that's and city council can together give us some sort of an overarching statement. Simply say that we create job creation. Perhaps we want to say create what kind of job creation. Just does not want to make a blanket statement, and then you become confusing because job creation could mean large industry.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm not saying that should be it. I'm just saying that's along those lines.
So if again, this is the first time the city has something, we have this document presented before the city council. So we realize it's going to be a continued improvement process. We together with lobbyists to support, and really their contribution is tremendous. We, departments, everybody weigh in, and we want to be mindful of and what is specific to Morro Bay. And with these statements presented before the city council are relatively neutral position, and then under the guiding principle that has been voiced by the city council in the past, for example, preserve local control, promote physical stability and economic vitality. So their economic development, but we didn't say development, we just say vitality, and then support funding opportunities. So under these three guiding principles, that we dropped this. And if there's specific things that city council wish to be modified or be added, remove, those are some things that will continue perfect as needs arises.
Okay, another one was something about the performance of the city and in having a workforce that is engaged and committed to responsive and exceptional public service for all.
That's
For a high customer service.
right. Certainly, that more, that statement is, of course, that's what we strive for. That's more like a city's mission statement. And which.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it would help with things like having things be back in-house, having, business licenses being back in-house, or, maybe there's funding to support
Right.
all hours of all regular business hours being open.
Those are, those are more on the, I appreciate the question. Those are city goals. When we're doing the city goals, these are more specific on the city goals. This legislative platform was, as lobbyists, as Spencer explained, and Mike explained, is on a legislative issue at the state and the federal level. We certainly, that would fall under local control. For example, we would say if state or federal want to take funding from local government so that they can fund some sort of enterprise or something, and then we are going to, the position would likely be opposed that, so that we can keep the money to expand our own workforce to provide a service rather than have somebody else do the work for us.
Okay. And is there any way we could put in language regarding, you've already talked about infrastructure, but infrastructure in combined with economic development to enhance like the downtown, shopping districts or retail areas, however that could be worded?
Yeah, we should be able to come up with something. Again, it's the guiding principle here under vitality. Yeah, we can certainly word something in that regard.
And then I agree with the rewording of some of those, the ones that Council Member Eccles brought up too.
City Manager Kimball,
Certainly.
this is considered a living document, correct?
Right.
So it can, I know we said that we would look at it, I think, every 2 years, but we could conceivably come back if we've got changes, right?
Sure. Certainly, any city document that way, when
Yeah, I just
we
wanna
come
make
up with,
sure that
right, the
that's-
2 years, because city council have a 2-year goal, and then state legislative cycle is 2 years. So that's kind of just coincide and make it easier for, but of course, it's a living document, and we should continue review it.
How much work does this take if we review it every 2 years? Is this like going to be a big production to like goals and things like that, or is it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, we were not, that's all depends on the expectation. We, the first one, because it's the first one, we have this discussion, and some other cities, when I look at their practice, was some of them even just put it under consent calendar because has been talked so much. And it's all depends. Just depends what has come before us. And Morro Bay is very special. We have so many issues in front of us and have huge impact. We're a small city, but we are dealing with issues that the city of Los Angeles is responsibility. So from that perspective, that's another reason we want to have a legislative platform to state the overarching position of the city council.
Are you asking for our, like, what things that, I'm not clear on what we're doing right now.
Oh, okay.
We, comments, I guess a really important comment from me is that I don't agree with the sales tax thing. I'm not in favor of that personally.
The Slowcox request, yeah, if that's going to be a issue, we can, of course, at city council, you have to decide, and we can remove that from this platform. And we can discuss it separately, and that's totally up to
Thank
city
you.
council.
Councilmember Eccles, comments?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A few comments. I acknowledge that there is somewhat of a bureaucratic nature to this. But bureaucracy is inherent in the way city government and government works. So it is a best practice. 6 of the 7 cities in our county have a legislative platform. The county has a legislative platform. I've operated under one before when I was the CEO of an advocacy group. And the legislative platform is designed to empower staff, but certainly not with unlimited power. It's to empower staff so that they're aware of the platform of the council, but then actually set up some guardrails too, so that staff doesn't go outside those guardrails. We as a council are still kept informed. I spoke with the city manager prior to this meeting and asked her about how the council would be informed when actions were taken out of this legislative platform. We would be informed. There would never be an instance when we were informed. And then the last issue was SlowCog. 6 of the 7 cities have signed on. I consider myself a fiscal conservative, and I'm very critical of taxes and new taxes. I don't like new taxes. But what I will say about this is the way I'm interpreting this affords more flexibility for the individual cities as well as the county. And then ultimately, I think it's very important to remember that any tax increase of this measure due sort of ironically to Prop 13 requires a 2/3 vote of the populace. So I'm looking at this as creating more flexibility and really empowering the electorate, the citizens, to vote if they needed to on a local tax measure. And the threshold for that, because it's a special use tax, is 2/3, so it's a high threshold. So it's not, I'm not viewing this, even being critical of taxes, I'm not viewing this as an easy pathway for any particular special agency to fleece the county or the residents, because there are safeguards in place for that. So I appreciate staff bringing this before the council. I'm prepared to approve it with those recommendations that we mentioned, some of those edits that we mentioned, and I think having the SlowCog language in there is a good thing as well.
Are you ready to make that a motion?
Has everyone spoken?
Yes.
Yep. Therefore, we don't have a motion for this. I move that the City of Morro Bay adopt the legislative platform presented before us with the amendments and edits as discussed.
Do I have a second on that?
I second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Eccles,
Yes?
Councilmember Landrum,
No.
Councilmember LaFay,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Edwards,
Yes.
and Mayor Wixom.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-1.
Thank you. Mike, are you still there?
I am Mayor.
Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. I know there's a time change and look forward to seeing you in Washington in a few weeks. Hopefully, as we move forward with this, it'll streamline our process there a little bit. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and I think it will. It's thoughtful and intentional and provides good organization moving forward. And I appreciate you inviting me to be here and to participate tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And staff's comfortable, you have the language for the
Yes.
corrections and things. I appreciate that. Spencer, thank you for joining us again. And again, thank you for your advocacy last week in Sacramento. Mr. Worley, thank you for being here. And if there's no further on this item, we will adjourn and come back at 5:30 for our regular meeting. Thank you.